Hello, tubers. This is Pat Dylan Jordan coming to you from the Wild West Ghetto in Illinois. This is the second most important video on the topic of law in my series, with Habeas Deus being the most important. But this is still not the video you are looking for, because no one has the intelligence, money, or balls to follow through on these absolutely indisputable, I probably should say undisputable, pronouncements and exposés of what the fraud of law really is. You'll have to wait for the third installment for the watered-down Cowards edition of how to interface with Governmente without being assassinated. There are pretenders out there who tell you that they know the law, and then in the same ignorant breath blather on about how we, the fucking peepholes, whatever. Clint Richardson slayed that nonsense years ago. So by now, even though his work isn't as popular as piano-playing cats on YouTube, these peepholes have been given notice that they are dangerously wrong. It came to me years earlier when Ralph Epperson used the word Publius for the people. I knew from trying to charm a woman on the beach in Hawaii that there are a lot of races that call themselves the people. The hot chick happened to take offense when I talked about the Eskimos, when she had indicated that she was from Alaska. Baked Alaska, from what I could see. Eskimo means eater of raw flesh. Then she informed me with droll distaste that the Inuit means the people. And she said she was on vacation with her husband. I went back into the bay to get severe sun poisoning on my back while snorkeling. There are a lot of races that call themselves the people, but the most famous that everyone knows about, unless they ain't from around these parts, like a different fucking solar system, is God's chosen people. Now, I keep trying to teach people so that they can break out of the word spellcasting that the reason it is referred to as the international Yehudi conspiracy is not that the conspiracy is international. It's that after the cataclysm, all three clans came down from on high, the mountains, to genocide or subjugate everyone that was left. They call themselves internationals because they think they own the fucking place.
There ain't no countries anymore. No more good guys. They're running the whole show. They own everything, the whole goddamn planet. They can do whatever they want.
The goy means of the nations, not them. So when you realize the planetary military occupation has been going on for several thousand years, and it is all a family operation, then you see that the governmente nonsense of we the peepholes means them. You're not the people, and neither am I, unless you are Yahudim or First Families of Virginia. The Constitution was an inter-office memo between dictators in the colony to the dictator in Merry Old. It was never countersigned by any regent or viceroy, so it is useless except by the enforcement under a gun. In true opposite day, a public school is an institution not for them, but by them. That's why their indoctrination centers are mandatory. A private school would be something that was set up by them and for them, or if you dared to set up your own, then it would be private too, because it wasn't part of their mind control cabal. Get it? These are the fundamentals. So if you listen to any ass trying to tell you about the law, there is no fucking law, only piracy. or the the Constitution, then you know that they don't know what the fuck they are talking about and will never bring about meaningful change, because the dynasty that set up this shithole system will allow the yap dogs to bark at the elephant if it pleases them. So in my earlier video, Habeas Deus, I demonstrated that the only and final solution is to Habeas Deus. Show me the God. Once their reason for being has been exposed as a lethal fraud, then everything fails. But like I said in that video, the world at large are ignorant, hypnotized pussy cowards, so no one has the balls to attack it there. But people are still nattering on about the powers of government to make rules, laws, order, and mandates. The argument being that a governor, by their own papers, does not have the authority to make law. So far that tracks. But what about gubernatorial orders and mandates? Bouvier's Law Dictionary, 1856. Law, martial. Martial law is a code established for the government of the Army and Navy of the United States. Definition number 2. Its principal rules are to be found in the Articles of War. The object of this code, or body of regulations, is to maintain that order and discipline, the fundamental principles of which are due obedience of the several ranks to their proper officers, and subordination of each rank to their superiors, and the subjection of the whole to certain rules of discipline essential to their acting within union and energy of an organized body. The violations of these laws are to be tried in a court martial. Number 3. A military commander has not the power, by declaring a district to be under martial law, to subject all the citizens to that code and to suspend the operation of the writ of habeas corpus. Many citations including Rules and Articles of War, Article 64. Black 2nd, 1910. Martial law, a system of law obtaining only in time of actual war and growing out of the exigencies thereof, arbitrary in its character, and depending only on the will of the commander of an army, which is established and administered in a place or district of hostile territory, held in belligerent possession, or sometimes in places occupied or pervaded by insurgents or mobs, and which suspends all existing civil laws as well as the civil authority and the ordinary administration of justice. How the hell does that track with Bouvier? Martial law, which is built upon no settled principles but is entirely arbitrary in its decision, is in truth and reality no law, but something indulged rather than allowed as a law. The necessity of order and discipline in an army is the only thing which can give it countenance, and therefore it ought not to be permitted in trifle of peace, when the king's courts are open for all persons to receive justice according to the laws of the land. Martial law is neither more nor less than the will of the general who commands the army. It overrides and suppresses all existing civil laws, civil officers, and civil authorities by the arbitrary exercise of military power, and every citizen or subject, in other words, the entire population of the country within the confines of its power, is subjected to the mere will or caprice of the commander. He holds the lives, liberty, and property of all in the palm of his hand. Martial law is regulated by no known or established system or code of laws, as it is over and above all of them, above the law. The commander is the legislator, judge, and executioner. Martial law is not the same thing as military law. The latter applies to only persons connected with the military forces of the country or to affairs connected with the army or with war. They just negated themselves. But is permanent in its nature, specific in its rules, and recognized part and a recognized part of the law of the land. Really? The former applies, when in existence, to all persons alike who are within the territory covered, but it is transient in its nature, existing only in the time of war or insurrection, is not specific or always the same, as it depends on the will and the discretion of the military commander, and is no part of the law of the land, except for the fucking spellcasting that they said. And I requote, martial law is not the same thing as military law. The latter applies to only persons connected with the military forces of a country or to affairs connected with the army or with war, but is permanent in nature, specific in rules, and recognized as part of the law of land. So wait a minute. If you got a fucking hostile military force of goddamn apes with fire sticks, and they are subject to military law, which is part of the law of the land, but they're enacting martial law, which is not part of the law of, fucking spellcasting. None of this makes sense. It's a reversal. It's opposite day. It's inversion. This is good as evil and evil is good. Fuck them with their own fire sticks. But before we get too confused, which I think is already past, mandate. In practice, a judicial command or precept proceeding from a court or judicial officer, directing the proper officer to enforce a judgment, sentence, or decree. In the practice of the Supreme Court of the United States, the mandate is a precept or order issued upon the decision of an appeal or writ of error, directing the action to be taken or disposition to be made of the case by the inferior court in some of the state jurisdictions, with the name, quote, mandate, has been substituted for, quote, mandamus as the formal title of that writ. The word may also denote a request or direction. Thus, a check is a mandate by the drawer to his banker to pay the amount to the transferee or holder of the check. Order. In a general sense, a mandate, precept, a command or direction authoritatively given, a rule or regulation. The distinction between, quote, order and, quote, requisition is that the first is a... They didn't fucking do this. Put it together, Jordan. And I repeat. No, I didn't. I didn't even eat beans today. Oh my fucking God. The distinction between, quote, order and, quote, requisition is that the first is a mandatory act. The latter that you crawl up the side of the house with, the latter is a request. Okay, so order is mandatory. Found out mandatory doesn't mean fucking jack shit. And the latter, which is requisition, is a request. Mills v. Martin, 19 Johns, New York 7. Fuck me with a stick, man. This is great shit. Ever wonder why Ralph Winterroad insisted on definitions? We can see clearly, because although you were given the idea during your inculcation of your employment indoctrination that mandatory overtime was, well, mandatory, you can see that the bastards hedge that it could be a forced thing or just a request on their part. Please come to work today. What would you like to order? I'd like to have a small fries and a small Coke and a small burger, please. Would you like to supersize that? No, thank you. You have no choice. Pull up to the window, pay for the supersize, and eat it or we will kill you. See? Orders are orders. Mandates are where guys have romantic evenings with other guys. Ba-dum-bum. So you have been swimming in false definitions and allowed to have outrageous expectations based on things that were never properly defined. They don't care. The system was set up to control you, not serve you. Martial law, New World Order, economic collapse. I've heard those fevered cries for 12 years without let up. They were always coming. It was always in the future. Here's the sick opposite day. They were always here. Martial law? The whole world is under military occupation. Your only test that you need to run for yourself is if you can cross borders freely without passports that are nothing but prisoner IDs to get you from one cell block to the next, and get there without customs inspecting your shit and charging you money for your shit in such a classic Yehudi parasite way that it makes you wonder how the world got pacified to shit like that that is called piracy in any other time, in any other place. International, institutional piracy. Your next passport will be based on you volunteering or be forced to violate your own DNA with a genetic rewrite that can't even be called a vaccine, so that you can move freely across a surface where you should have been unencumbered before this entire fuck job started. And I might be referring to this current non-viral, non-event, or this fuck shit where you needed passports and customs just to move about fucking freely. Now, we might consider the concept of a hummingbird that literally flies from Canada all the way down to Mexico, often nonstop, which is abso-fucking-lutely insane. Without a passport, there's no show me your papers. Without going through customs. Hey, did you drink that honeysuckle before you came here? There's a honeysuckle tax. Now, to keep it real, there are crazy motherfuckers that put bands on the legs of hummingbirds so that they can track them. Wait, is that like contact tracing? Did you have contact with that honeysuckle before you made it to Mexico? You're going to have to be quarantined for 14 days. So, you know, the absurdities become fractal, but there's a bunch of jackasses that talk about natural law. Natural law dictates that if you are a bird and you're going to fly from fucking Canada to Mexico, you don't need to file a fucking flight plan, you don't need to have anybody's permission, and you don't have to pay them for a goddamn thing. You just fucking do it. And it was really kind of inspired that somebody, don't know who it is attributed to, but said human beings are the only creatures on the planet that pay rent to live there. This entire situation is being passed off as existence is the result of millennia of herd breeding and management within a corporate confinement operation. New World Order? How about Old World Disorder that has been there since the clans came down from the mountain? How about it was only a future thing because it took them this long to breed the herd down into an idiotic, hypnotizable, passive lump of protoplasm, but they had been working on their plan for 6,000 years. Nothing fucking new about that shit. Also, it isn't coming in the future. It has always been here. Then we have the economic collapse. I don't know about you, but I'm not an independent businessman blessed by the cycling of Republicans in governmente. I've been living on next week's paycheck for as long as I can remember. The only economic collapse will be for those who never suffered hardship. Good for them. Welcome to the bottom of the crab bucket. So you see, everything in alternative media just vomits tropes, memes, and tired jingoisms that are meaningless in the face of reality and very simple deconstruction. So what does this boil down to? That the entire world is under military occupation by a millennia-old cabal that uses economic, biological, and tactical warfare on everything all the time from the beginning. Now that I've set you straight on the meaning of words and their significance within the spell, let us pay attention to the Constitution of the state of North Carolina, which is what got us here in the first place. Section 5, Duties of the Governor. Subsection 4, Execution of Laws. The governor shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Subsection 5, Commander-in-Chief. The governor shall be the commander-in-chief of the military forces of the state, except when they shall be called into the service of the United States. I think you know what execution is by now. Or maybe not. Let us review if you forgot from 5 minutes ago. Quote, martial law is regulated by no known or established system or code of laws, as it is over and above all of them. The commander is the legislator, judge, and executioner. Are you feeling it? Because although it might seem confusing because it flies in the face of everything you were told or thought you knew, so that you have to relearn the opposite position, I laid it out for you in a serial fashion so that even a third grader can get it. The governor is the commander-in-chief of the state military. The continent of North America has been under military occupation since the Yahuds first showed up here. There is no law of the land, just the caprice of the commander. Do you see that they used the single word that ties all of the fraud and spellcasting together? Military commander. The commander is the legislator, judge, and executioner. The guru asses go on about separation of powers. The governor is the executive. The judicial branch rules on points of law. The legislature pulls new asses out of their laws or new laws out of their asses. But what does that mean? The executive executes. This means that he makes sure that the laws that the other asses pulled out of their asses are followed, or fucking else he will execute you. Get it? Military, not civil government. No law of the land, just piracy. Military force placing legislation, judicial ruling, and execution all in the hands of a criminally insane Yahud that you voted for. We could stop here because I can't make it any clearer than that, and it will just be an exploration of the fractal depth. But if you still have your nose plugged and don't ever expect to come up for air when you're diving with me, let me show you the anatomy of the devil as I do my proctology. The gurus tell us all day long that an executive cannot make law, only enforce it. A judge cannot make law, only make a decision on it. So although Texas had judges issuing orders, those orders, we already covered that, have no force and effect of law unless there was a law that had definitions and rules in the state or federal register. A judge cannot make law. A judge cannot make an order unless that law, regulation, rule had already existed for the order, please may I have some boogers and flies, to be requested or mandated, and we already covered that. Do you see the fucking duality word game that the goddamn Yehudi play? A judge in Texas made an order. That is the kind of order you would place at a fast food window. Please make me some fries and some Coke to get high on. No, you're just a judge. I don't take orders from you. Put on your mask. But the idiot heard the word order, and they presumed that a non-legislator could tell them what to do and an executioner would back him up. And they do. That's where your tax dollars went, to buy these freaks weapons to threaten you with for your safety. Absent are the legislators who could have pushed through any new law pulled out of their ass with those nice curly little hairs still attached. But they didn't. So what is the only other option here? Quoting from whitehouse.gov of Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, former head of the CIA, March 20th, 2020. Remarks by President Trump, Vice President Pence, and members of the Coronavirus Task Force in press briefing. Secretary Pompeo. May I just say one more thing? There's been some discussion about China and what they knew and when they knew it, and I've been very critical. We need to know immediately. The world is entitled to know. The Chinese government was the first to know of this risk to the world, and that puts a special obligation to make sure that data gets to our scientists, our professionals. This is not about retribution. This matters going forward. We're in a live exercise here. The president should have, Secretary Pompeo, to get this right, the president should have let us know. I saw the original press conference on video. Now, the mood of those presenting this material give convincing impetus to us thinking that Trump was referring to the deep state that should have let us know that this was a live exercise. But when read in context, it seems clear that Trump is agreeing with Pompeo that perhaps the Chinese should have let us know earlier. If we just take that off the table for now, we're still confronted with the smiling con man referring to a live exercise. That is specific language used by the military. Do you see why I took 5 pages of setup just to get to this point? You do not make flippant comments that high up in government. Oh, well, hell, who am I kidding? Have you ever listened to Bush or Trump? My point being that if there was such a thing as legitimate leadership and decorum, then they would mean what they say and say what they mean. Could you imagine me in the pinnacle of power? Someone would piss me off and I would just tell them to go fuck themselves. They'd probably just stand there with a blank stare, so I'd have to insist. No, I mean that literally. What this single comment by Pompeo did was set the Rube Goldberg machine of my mind back to the Constitution of North Carolina, designating the governor as, and I quote, Commander-in-Chief. The governor shall be Commander-in-Chief of the military forces of the state, except when they shall be called into the service of the United States. So now that we have the added confusion of, is the executive order just a pleasant request with no teeth because it has no checks and balances to legitimize it? Or have the governors declared a state of emergency that Clint Richardson spent his life trying to explain to people merely means a state of war? Bringing us full circle back to the military, martial law, and the governor as commander-in-chief. Granted, they have been in a state of undeclared perpetual war against us, so the executive orders and declarations are mere formalities to keep the hostilities going. But then you might suspect that if China released Fauci's paid-for bioweapon, that would be an act of war, and if governmente gave a rat's ass about us, which it don't, then the president, quote, should have let us know. I'd like to go off script for a brief memento, as if I haven't done through this entire damn thing, to say that as I type this and read it, that I find it to be a brilliant deconstruction of the kind and content you will find nowhere else. And it is amazing in its coherency and conclusions, given how little sleep I actually get. Some people learn by listening, some by seeing, some by reading. My narration scripts are always available for free on request, and this one is amazing me as I craft it. It ranks among my best work. So where might this leave us? In the middle of an undeclared silent war where they smile at us while they drop clues about live exercises and governors as military commanders-in-chief issuing military orders because we are and always have been under martial law, so that what happens next is merely at the whim of the invader. Or are we to play word games with shysters and hope that if we outword them, that they will not have armed thugs pull grown men off of buses for not wearing a yellow Star of David on their coats? I mean mask. Be it clear, you are obligated to get to the heart of the matter of whether they are playing word games or war games. Your personal obligation to resolve this is based on a memory of when I had read either the Laws of Nation or the Laws of Wars, or some citation in a law dictionary, that the invader and occupier has no obligation whatsoever to notify the invaded and occupied territory that they have been invaded and are under military occupation. I literally don't have the time to look up that citation, so you will just have to take it as a valid memory of someone who has been doing this for over 20 years without a break, so that if you want that cite, you will have to look it up for yourselves and or just sue the motherfuckers to bring out that very thing in court. They're not going to fucking tell you. And if you jerk around all day long trying to play fucking word games with them, never knowing that they will not admit that they are your invader and occupier, then it will just be a fucking masturbation fest for eternity. It's all in the words, and the spellcraft has been craftily structured so that it could go either way. So just like in my other video, if you kill God, then the government falls. The only solution here is to sue these bastards and compel them to tell us if Fauci's bioweapon has gotten loose and they can't control it, so they put us under martial law, or if they've just been fucking with us, creating economic terrorism and murder because it's just a live exercise gameplay, or if the entire system of government from the beginning has been martial law, but they have been playing word games to cover up that fact. That would still be a military operation. Therefore, everything that they do is an act of war, and war is a crime, and so they should be charged with fraud and murder, and the world released from these biocidal maniacs.